Most people think Bigfoot stories are just campfire tales. But every year, people disappear into the woods expecting an ordinary hike and come back with stories they can't explain. Some report impossible footprints. Others hear something huge moving just beyond the trees. Today, I've gathered some of the most chilling Bigfoot encounters I've ever come across. Whether you believe them or not, these are the kinds of stories that stay with you long after the lights go out. The gate is already bent when the GoPro flicks on, the heavy steel crossbar pushed outward from the inside, bowing away from the road, like something enormous had pressed against it until the metal gave way. The cyclist barely slows. The camera catches the gate in wide angle as he squeezes past the gap, and then he's through, and the logging road swallows him whole. The cyclist pumps hard up the first short rise, breathing loud over the wind noise, and for a moment, everything is exactly what it looks like. A guy on a bike, a closed road, some poor lighting decision. Then the camera catches the tree line on the right. There is something standing in the trees. It is not a stump. Stumps don't have shoulders. The shape is massive, easily 7.5 feet tall, and it is standing perfectly still between two pine trunks about 60 feet off the road, partially screened by brush, watching. The cyclist doesn't see it, but the GoPro does. For 4 full seconds as the bike crests the rise, the shape is visible in the right edge of the frame, dark, upright, wide across the chest, in a way that no deer or bear or trick of shadow can account for. Then the camera angle shifts as the road descends, and the shape is gone from frame. That is Bigfoot, and Bigfoot is already watching. The first mile of the road is wrong in a way that takes a moment to name. It's too quiet. The only sounds on the audio track are the cyclist's tires grinding gravel, his breathing, and the soft mechanical click of the drivetrain. Then the branches start snapping. The snapping comes from the right side of the trail, deep in the trees, and it comes in a rhythm, crack, pause, that matches the cadence of the bike exactly. When the cyclist accelerates, the snapping accelerates. When he coasts, it slows. He doesn't notice it at first. The camera picks it up before he does, because the audio is more honest than a person moving fast through darkening woods. For 30 seconds, 40 seconds, the bicycle and the forest keep the same beat. Something in those trees is pacing him. Bigfoot is not running. Bigfoot is not rushing. Bigfoot is walking, long and unhurried, keeping time with a man on a bicycle, the way a cat tracks a mouse across a room, not closing in, not falling back, just maintaining the exact distance it chooses to maintain. That detail is the most frightening thing on the footage so far. Not the size of the shape in the tree line, not the way it stood so perfectly still, the fact that it is matching his speed at a walk. The cyclist hears it finally. He pumps harder. The sound in the trees pumps harder too. He glances right, and for half a second, the camera catches a dark mass moving through the brush, not a flash of fur, not a scramble. Movement that is controlled and deliberate, and too large to be anything the cyclist could name and stay comfortable about. He looks back at the road. He pedals harder. The snapping in the trees falls back into rhythm. There are trees snapped clean at chest height on the bend, not blown down. Snap the way you snap a pencil. The brakes fresh and pale and raw. Sap still beating on the exposed wood. 6 of them in a rough line, all leaning the same direction, toward the road. Whatever moved through here was walking, and whatever it was tall enough that chest height for it is 7 feet off the ground, and strong enough that pine trunks 4 inches across gave way without drama. The cyclist stops pedaling for 3 seconds. The camera bobs as the bike slows, and in that brief hesitation, the tree line on the left side of the road opens up, a gap between 2 large firs maybe 40 feet in, and Bigfoot is visible there, not hiding anymore, and it's walking. Bigfoot is moving left to right through the gap at a steady, upright pace, arms swinging, covering ground in strides so long they barely look like effort. The creature is in frame for less than a second, but the footage is clear enough. Bipedal, enormous, dark, and completely unbothered by the man on the road 20 feet away. It walks through the gap and the trees close behind it like a curtain falling. And then it's gone. The cyclist has seen it now. The camera catches his panic. The handlebars jerking left, then correcting, the front wheels skidding a half inch in the gravel, and he is pedaling again, hard, his breathing spiking on the audio, legs churning, but the road ahead narrows. The gravel turns uneven, chunks of loose stone and embedded rock jutting up through the packed surface, and the bike bucks and shimmies under him, slowing him even as he pushes harder. He can't hold speed on this surface. The road is fighting him. Behind him, through the gap in the trees he just passed, Bigfoot does not break into a run. The audio catches the first clear sound of it, a heavy, rhythmic impact on soft earth, the sound of something massive covering ground in long, controlled strides. It's walking faster, the strides lengthening until the time between impacts stretches and the sound deepens, each footfall hitting the ground like a thrown sandbag. The gap between each strike is enormous, a stride that must be 5 feet, maybe 6, and it is closing distance without raising its pace above a casual walk. The cyclist glances back. The camera follows the motion and catches the fog line 60 yards behind. A low ground fog rolling in off the hillside, soft and white, already thick enough to have visibility. At the edge of that fog, Bigfoot has moved to the tree line right alongside the road and is tracking parallel through the brush, not on the road surface, but in the narrow strip of undergrowth between the gravel shoulder and the forest proper. It is visible in the frame for 2, 3, 4 seconds, a dark vertical shape moving steadily through the gray-white fog, never quite stepping onto the road, never falling back into the trees. Just there, on the edge, matching every turn. The cyclist tries weaving. He cuts the bike hard left, then right, then left again, breaking his straight-line path and putting trees between himself and the shape in the fog. It's a reasonable instinct. It doesn't work. Bigfoot adapts inside a single stride. The shape in the trees vanishes from one gap and reappears at the next, having shifted its angle through the forest with a fluency that makes the cyclist's weaving look like it's being predicted rather than followed. The creature is moving through the forest on its own route, a route that runs parallel to the road but intersects with it at every opening, every gap, every place where the tree line breaks for more than 2 feet. It is not following the cyclist's path, it is charting a better one. The cyclist cuts right toward the tree line, trying to break whatever line of sight Bigfoot is using. The camera catches branches whipping past the lens, a brief plunge into the shadow under the pines, and then the road again as he corrects. In that half second in the trees, there is a sound on the audio, a low, resonant exhale, close enough to distort the microphone slightly. Not a growl nor a scream, just breath, enormous and controlled from something that was exactly where the cyclist rode. He gets back on the road and pedals faster than he has since the gate. It's do or die time. The road drops, not gradually, it tips over like a table edge and becomes steep, wet stone beneath the gravel, the surface slick with moisture that has seeped up through the roadbed from the hillside. The cyclist's tires lose grip on the first pedal stroke of the descent, and he stops pedaling entirely, feathering his brakes, the wheels skipping and chattering on the stone. He's going fast now without trying, the grade pushing him harder than his legs could, the bike shimmying under him as the tires hunt for traction. The camera swings back. Bigfoot is at the top of the slope. It is standing at the crest of the hill, fully visible against the darkening sky, and it is looking down the road, then moves, not down the road, into the trees on the left side, disappearing from view at the top of the frame. The cyclist faces forward again, fighting the bike through a wet curve, rear wheel sliding 3 inches before biting. When the road straightens for a moment and the camera can see 50 yards ahead, Bigfoot is already there, halfway down the slope, emerging from the tree line on the right side of the road, having come down through the forest on a line that cut the switchback entirely. The hill that is slowing the cyclist down and threatening to throw him off his bike is, for Bigfoot, nothing. The creature used the terrain rather than fighting it, dropping through the forest on a direct line while the road curved and doubled back. This is not luck. This is not a shortcut stumbled onto. This is something that knows this hill, knows where the road goes, and is using that knowledge to get ahead of the man on the bicycle. The cyclist realizes it at the same moment the camera shows it. His breathing changes on the audio, not faster, but different, a sharp inhale and a held breath that signals the specific kind of fear that comes with understanding rather than surprise. He is being herded. The hill ends in a flat, and Bigfoot is already at the bottom, and there is nowhere to go but forward. The fog at the base of the hill is not the same as the ground fog from before. This is a wall, white and dense and vertical, dropping visibility to 10 feet, maybe less. The cyclist hits it at speed, and the camera turns white. Everything disappears. The road, the tree line, the sky, all of it replaced by a flat, featureless white that the GoPro's exposure system can't parse. For 2 full seconds, there is nothing but fog and the sound of tires on gravel and the cyclist's breathing. Then Bigfoot is in the fog with him. The shape appears in the white, not a silhouette against brightness, but a darker density within the fog itself, a place where the whiteness is thicker and darker at the same time, moving without sound. It is 10 feet to the left, then 12 feet ahead. Then the fog shifts, and it is just a shapeless mass of dark moving through the white, its outline breaking apart and reforming with each gust that stirs the fog layer. No footsteps. The ground here is soft, wet pine duff soaked through with moisture, and Bigfoot's footfalls make no sound that carries over the cycling noise. The cyclist brakes, the tires lock and slide, and the bike goes sideways, and the camera tilts hard to the right before he catches it. He puts a foot down and stops, standing astride the bike in the fog, and the audio goes very quiet. Just his breathing, just the distant sound of of water somewhere on the hillside. And then, very close, 8 feet, maybe less, a sound that is not wind and not water and not any animal sound the microphone has captured yet. A sound like air being displaced by something large and slow. The soft percussion of movement too controlled to be accidental and too close to be safe. Bigfoot is right there. The cyclist doesn't wait for a visual. He drops the bike. The audio catches the clatter of aluminum on gravel, and he runs. The camera shakes so badly for the next 40 seconds that individual frames are nearly unusable, but the audio is continuous, and the blur of motion is consistent. He is in the trees. Branches snap across the lens, a bright flare as a thin branch catches the light, then shadow, then another branch. His footsteps on the forest floor are soft, wet needles, soft soil, and his breathing is ragged now, not the controlled effort of a hard climb, but the open-mouthed gasp of someone running as hard as their legs will carry them through darkness. Behind him, Bigfoot is in the trees too. The sound of it is not frantic. That is the part that the audio captures most clearly in the moments when the cyclist slows enough that his own footsteps stop masking the world around him. There is no crashing, no blind thrashing through undergrowth. There is the sound of large things bending, branches and saplings flexing under pressure and snapping back, but it is a rhythmic, controlled sound. Bigfoot is moving through the forest the way water moves through a landscape, not fighting the terrain, using it, taking the path of least resistance that also happens to be faster than the path the cyclist is on. The cyclist cuts right. Bigfoot is already there, a sound of heavy impact on the ground somewhere to the right that is close enough to redirect him without a visual. He cuts left. The same thing happens. Bigfoot is cutting angles, staying in front of each direction. The cyclist chooses the moment he chooses it, appearing on the right when he goes right, on the left when he goes left, as if it can see where the turn will end before the turn begins. The net effect is that the cyclist keeps moving in the same direction, pushed forward by the sound of something he cannot outmaneuver. The forest floor drops away and the camera catches a streak of dim sky, a ravine 5 feet across, spanned by a fallen log, maybe a foot in diameter. The log is old bark sloughing off in strips, pale and damp in the last gray light. The cyclist hits it running and doesn't stop, jumping onto the log and running across it with his arms out, balancing by instinct over the 7-foot drop to dry stone below. He is halfway across when he sees Bigfoot on the other side. Bigfoot is standing at the far end of the log, on the bank above the ravine, and it got there faster than a man running flat out through open ground. The camera catches it clearly for the first time, without fog or motion blur, fully upright, arms at its sides, watching the man on the log with something that the footage cannot interpret as anything other than patience. Just waiting, the way something waits when it knows it has already won the geometry of the situation. Then Bigfoot steps onto the log, 1 foot first, slow, the whole weight coming down deliberately, and the log flexes. The cyclist feels it. The camera bobs as the vibration travels, and he runs. There is nowhere to run except forward, past Bigfoot, but Bigfoot steps aside just enough. 1 step left, opening the bank, and the cyclist hits the far side and scrambles up the bank, clawing at roots, pulling himself over the edge with both hands. Behind him, the audio catches the log creaking under a load the cyclist's weight was nowhere near producing. Bigfoot crosses the ravine in 3 strides, balanced with no adjustment, no hesitation, the way you walk a floor you have walked 1,000 times. The cyclist runs uphill. The embankment ahead is steep, 40 degrees maybe, exposed root systems poking out of the bare soil where rain has eaten the slope. The cyclist uses them like ladder rungs, grabbing and pulling, climbing hand over hand, while his feet scramble for purchase on the wet earth. It's slow going. It is, for a human, as fast as it gets. Bigfoot does not climb the same way. The camera catches it from below and behind as the cyclist crests the embankment, 2 massive hands driving into the earth, fingers splaying and gripping, and then a pull that lifts the entire body in a single lurch. Bigfoot is not climbing the slope so much as refusing to be stopped by it, driving itself upward by the sheer application of strength against dirt. The cyclist reaches the top and rolls over the edge onto flat ground, and Bigfoot is already there. It's standing on flat ground, having come up a different face of the hill, a faster route through the forest that the camera never captured because it was behind the cyclist, and now it is in front of him again, 10 feet away on the edge of the ridge, outlined against against the sky. The cyclist turns and runs along the ridge. The conservation fence appears out of nowhere, a 6-foot chain-link fence. Old, the posts rusted orange, running perpendicular to his path and cutting off the ridge. The cyclist hits it at speed and doesn't slow, one hand grabbing the chain link and his feet finding the mesh, and he is over the top in 5 seconds, landing hard on the far side and staggering but staying upright. He does not hear Bigfoot hit the fence. Instead, he hears the fence coming down. A single sharp metallic shriek as a steel post pulls out of the ground, the chain link buckling in a wave, and then the sound of a section of fence folding flat. The camera catches it over his shoulder as he runs, Bigfoot stepping through a 6-foot gap in the chain link where 2 posts have simply given way. The mesh hanging in folds, the creature not slowing, not acknowledging the fence as an obstacle any more than a man acknowledges a wet paper bag on the floor. He runs along the fence line, using it as a wall on his right. The logic is simple. The fence is a barrier, and if Bigfoot is on the other side, the fence buys distant. The camera tracks the fence post ticking past, regular as a metronome, and for 50 yards, the only sound is his footsteps and his breathing, and the distant creak of settling metal behind him. Then, the fence starts moving. On the other side of the chain link, Bigfoot is using the fence the way the cyclist is, as a guide, a straight line to follow, a landmark in the dark forest. Bigfoot's shadow is visible through the mesh in the places where the tree cover breaks enough to let in the last gray skylight, moving parallel, matching stride for stride. The fence that was supposed to be a barrier is now a channel, and Bigfoot is on one side, and the cyclist is on the other, and they are running the same line. He leaves the fence and dives into the darkness of the forest. The drainage channel is concrete, a rectangular culvert about 4 feet wide and 5 feet deep, built to carry runoff down the hillside, bone dry in the late summer, but smelling of wet stone and rot. The cyclist drops into it feet first, the camera catching the gray walls rising around him, and starts running. It is, in the moment, logical, a concrete channel with no loose footing, no branches, no obstacles, the fastest path he has found since leaving the road. The footsteps behind him arrive in the channel and become something else entirely. Concrete channels are echo chambers. Each of Bigfoot's footfalls, that heavy, deliberate impact, that sandbag on earth sound, bounces off the walls and doubles back and then doubles back again, so that the sound of one pursuing creature fills the channel the way thunder fills a narrow valley. The audio on the footage clips, the microphone can't handle it, and the cyclist's own footsteps are completely buried under the reverberating weight of what is behind him. The channel walls are rising on both sides, the concrete damp and gray, and the sky above is a narrow strip dark purple, barely visible at the top of the channel's open sides. The channel fork, a Y junction, the main channel continuing straight and a narrower branch cutting left maybe 2 feet wide. The cyclist takes the narrow branch without slowing, turning left and scraping his shoulder on the junction corner, the camera catching a brief flash of concrete rushing past too close, and then he is in the narrow channel, arms brushing both walls. Bigfoot takes neither branch. The audio catches the grunt first, low, chest deep, the sound of massive effort, and then the camera catches the junction behind him. Bigfoot has vaulted over the concrete divider wall rather than choosing either channel, landing ahead of the fork on the far side, blocking the main channel and forcing the narrow branch. The creature landed in exactly the place that eliminates the most options. The narrow channel spits him out onto a gravel slope, and the cyclist scrambles up it, clawing at the rock, and emerges back onto what was once a road, narrower than the logging road, barely a track, running along the edge of a cliff face with nothing on the right but a 70-foot drop and scrub pine below. His bike is there. Somehow, through the weaving and the trees and the channel and the ravine, the bicycle has ended up here, lying on its side in the gravel. The GoPro's twin obviously mounted to the handlebars, still running and capturing a different angle on the same scene. The cyclist's feet, the gravel, and behind him, emerging from the channel, the lower half of something enormous. He grabs the bike without stopping. He is on it and moving in 3 seconds. The cliff road is the fastest surface since the logging road, the gravel packed and even, and the cyclist uses every inch of it, driving hard into the pedals and letting the bike accelerate below him. The camera angle from the handlebar mount catches the road rushing past in a blur of gray, the cliff face close on the left, the drop close on the right, and the audio fills with wind noise and tire roar. On the slope below the cliff road, through the scrub pine and loose rock, Bigfoot is keeping pace. Not on the road, below it, on terrain that should make pace impossible. Loose shale, 40-degree incline, scrub brush thick enough that a person would have to fight through it. Bigfoot is not fighting through it. Branches explode outward as the creature hits them, not bending, not parting, but snapping and scattering, and the sound carries up to the road and bursts like something hitting a chain link fence with a bat. The slope is trying to pull the creature creature down, and the creature is ignoring the slope, moving across it at road speed through pure physics-defying insistence. The cyclist's speed no longer matters. That is the information the cliff road is delivering. Whatever speed the bicycle can achieve on this surface, Bigfoot matches it from terrain, where matching that speed should be impossible. It is not a question of who is faster. It is a question of who owns the terrain, and the terrain belongs to something that treats loose shale on a 40-degree slope as a minor inconvenience. He reaches for his brakes as the road narrows, too narrow to ride. The path ahead squeezes to 2 feet wide, the cliff face brushing the handlebars on the left, and he has to slow and pick his way through, the bike wobbling, his knees brushing stone. Below him, through a gap in the scrub, Bigfoot is visible for 1 clear second. Directly below, looking up, its face turned toward the cyclist on the cliff road 30 feet above with an expression the camera cannot read and does not need to. Then the scrub closes over it and the sound of branches continues below. Moving forward, he triggers the rocks accidentally. His front wheel clips a loose section of the road edge and a cascade of stone goes over the side. A dozen rocks, some of them the size of his head, bouncing down the cliff face in a clatter of impact, each one louder than the last as they accelerate. A logical next action. More rock, on purpose, pushed over the edge with his foot. 3, 4, 5. A small rock slide dropping into the scrub below where the sounds of movement are loudest. The rock slide sounds like something large breaking. The scrub rustles violently as debris impacts it. The movement sounds below stop for exactly 1 second. Then they continue. Bigfoot emerges from the bottom of the rockfall zone, still moving forward, still at pace, the debris having done nothing measurable. The sound of its movement is unchanged. The only difference is that a few seconds have passed. The cliff road ends and the forest opens into a straight corridor. 2 rows of dense fir trees, old growth, their trunks 2 feet across, spaced close enough that only the corridor between them is navigable. It runs straight for maybe 150 yards. At the end of it, the trees thin and there is a shape against the lighter dark of an open sky. A building, a road, something that means other people. The cyclist sees it and accelerates. Everything left in his legs, everything left in his lungs, going into the 150 yards between him and the end of the corridor. Bigfoot steps out of the trees at the far end of the corridor before the cyclist is halfway down it, not charging, just there. Standing in the corridor's exit, filling it with its width, looking down the 75 yards of open space at the man sprinting toward it. Then it moves, not to close the distance, but sideways, 1 step back into the trees, not blocking the exit anymore, just present at the edge of it, like the chase is not over, like the chase is still being offered to continue. The cyclist doesn't slow down. He makes the choice in a half second and goes for the corridor exit straight at where Bigfoot just was, banking on the gap. The camera catches the tree trunks flashing past, the exit rushing up the dark edge where the corridor opens, and he is through, and the building is ahead, and he is still running. There is a concrete culvert under the road, not a large one, a drainage pipe, maybe 3 feet in diameter, the opening dark and low, running under the road grade at road level. He sees it, and he goes for it the way drowning people go for anything they can reach. He goes in head first. The camera stabilizes for the first time in 40 minutes. The culvert is round, concrete, cold. The cyclist has pushed himself in up to his hips, his upper body and the GoPro inside the pipe, and the world in the footage is reduced to a circle of concrete tube with a dim ring of sky visible at the far end, maybe 20 yards away. His breathing fills the pipe, bouncing off the walls, and his heartbeat is audible on the audio as a rhythmic distortion in the microphone. Nothing is moving for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, the footage is still, and the audio is just breath and pulse. Then Bigfoot arrives at the entrance. The circle of dark sky at the entrance shrinks. Bigfoot is crouching at the opening, and the shape of it fills the frame. Shoulders wider than the culvert opening, the creature having to duck its head and angle sideways just to bring its face to the entrance. The darkness from outside flows into the pipe, and the footage goes to near black, the GoPro adjusting desperately for the new light level. What the camera can see, a mass of dark, details lost in the adjustment. Bigfoot is not trying to fit through the pipe. The pipe is too narrow by a foot on each side. The creature knows this. It is crouching at the entrance the way you crouch at a mouse hole, not trying to go in, knowing it doesn't need to. One arm enters the culvert. It comes in slowly, not a grab, an extension. The arm moving forward at a pace that has nothing urgent about it, nothing frantic. The hand is enormous, the fingers spread slightly, and it is dark enough that the camera only catches it in detail when the knuckles brush the concrete sides of the pipe. Left side, a soft scrape of contact, and the arm adjusts, centering itself. It is not reaching blindly. It is placing itself deliberately, moving forward with the patience of something that knows exactly what is at the end of the pipe and is in no hurry because hurry is not necessary. The cyclist screams. It is the first sound he has made that isn't breathing or the wordless grunting of physical effort. It echoes in the culvert like a gunshot in a bathroom, doubling and tripling off the concrete, and the hand pauses for exactly 1 second and then continues forward. The screaming stops. There is a sudden, violent shift in the camera angle, not a gradual motion, but an instantaneous jerk, the footage lurching from the interior of the pipe to a spinning view of concrete rushing past, and then open air, and then gravel. The sound on the audio is a single heavy impact and then nothing. The last image the GoPro captures is from where it has landed, on its side in the gravel above the culvert entrance. The road is empty. The culvert entrance is empty. The bicycle is lying on its side 20 feet away. The forest holds its silence. The footage ends. Marcus Tilley has been driving long-haul routes through southern Ohio for 11 years. He has logged more than 1 million miles on these roads. He knows the difference between a deer at the shoulder and a shape in the dark that isn't one. He was doing a routine overnight run on Route 56 when it happened, 3:14 in the morning. No other traffic. The road ahead was empty and straight, and then it wasn't. Something stepped out of the tree line and onto the asphalt. Marcus had maybe 3 seconds. He yanked the wheel hard to the right, hard enough that the trailer fishtailed, tires screaming across the center line. And when he looked back through the windshield, the thing he'd swerved around was still moving, crossing the road, not running, not startled, not doing anything that suggested it had registered a 40,000-pound truck as a threat worth reacting to. It moved in a long, fluid stride, unhurried, weightless, impossibly smooth for something that Marcus estimated at 9 feet tall. He's a big man himself, 6'2", and he told me the proportion of what he saw to the road width he's driven 1,000 times was something he couldn't unfold in his head for days afterward. It was too large, not just larger than a person, larger in a way that made the road look like a different road, like something had rescaled it. He pulled to the shoulder, hazard lights strobing red across the tree line. He sat with the engine running for 4 minutes. He checked his phone twice before he got out. He walked to the center of the road and stopped. The asphalt was rippling, not cracked, not buckled, rippling, the way blacktop looks on a July highway in triple-digit heat. He pressed his palm flat against the surface. The road was warm, warm enough that he pulled his hand back. The outside temperature that night was 39 degrees. The asphalt beneath where it had crossed was radiating heat like a cast iron skillet off a stove. That's not a footprint, that's a thermal event. His dash cam covers the 12 seconds before and after. What it captured was not footage of Bigfoot. It was 12 seconds of white static and a low-frequency hum. When the image returned, the road was empty. Ray Dunlap has owned coonhounds his entire adult life. His best dog, a 7-year-old red and tan male named Copper, had never once refused a command. Not once in 7 years. Until the night Bigfoot came through Vinton County, Copper ran from something so completely that he chose a sealed, century-old railroad tunnel over the open dark of a county he knew by scent. Moonville Tunnel was cut through a sandstone ridge in the mid-1800s. It's sealed now and surrounded by deep forest. Ray had walked past it 100 times without a second thought. At 4 in the morning, Copper's GPS collar showed the dog sprinting northeast from near Route 56 at a full fleeing pace. Ray followed through the trees, calling the dog's name, getting nothing back. The signal stopped at the entrance of Moonville Tunnel. Ray found Copper pressed against the back wall, 40 yards in absolute darkness. Full body shudder, continuous. Copper's eyes fixed on the tunnel entrance. He wouldn't look at Ray, wouldn't move toward his voice. Ray had to carry him out, all 62 pounds, and Copper didn't stop shaking for 2 hours. At the tunnel entrance, just outside the threshold where sandstone meets the dirt path, Ray found a footprint. He measured it against his boot, and then again with the tape measure he keeps in his vest. 18 inches long, 8 inches wide at the ball of the foot. The impression depth in the soft soil put the weight at somewhere between 600 and 800 pounds by Ray's read. And Ray has been reading animal signs in Vinton County for decades. But the size wasn't what made him photograph it and text it to his cousin before he'd gotten Copper back to the truck. The toes were webbed, fully webbed, the way a beaver's hind foot is webbed, with the membrane pressing clear impressions in the mud between each digit. Ray has found bear tracks, deer, wild hog, river otter. He knows what belongs in that soil. He held his flashlight over that print and told me nothing that lives in Ohio leaves a track like that. Then he noticed Copper's flank, a burn mark, circular, about the diameter of a $50, in the fur with none of the surrounding hair singed. Skin unbroken, no blood, a precise isolated thermal mark that has no fire, no branch, no friction explains. Webbed feet on something that weighs the better part of half a ton, a burn mark on a dog that fled. And somewhere on Route 56, 4 miles back, the asphalt was still warm. Kira Vasquez was a junior at Ohio University who documented everything. She went live on the Strouds Run Trail with 212 viewers watching. For the first 9 minutes and 39 seconds, the video is exactly what it looks like. A college student on a familiar trail. At 9 minutes and 40 seconds, Kira stops walking. The camera still goes with her. 4 seconds of silence. Then, in a voice noticeably quieter than anything before it, she says 3 words, "It's not a bear." Then she runs. The footage during the run is shaky, but at the 6-second mark, the camera swings left for just over 2 seconds. And in those 2 seconds, in the gap between 2 mature oak trees at the edge of the trail, something is visible. I've paused on that frame more times than I can count. The 2 oaks are approximately 14 inches apart at that gap. I confirmed it by visiting the trail myself. 14 inches is not a passage. It's a gap you turn sideways to squeeze through if you're slender. What moves through it in Kira's footage is not slender. It is massive and dark, with a shoulder width the shaky frame still cannot fully contain. It did not push the trees apart. Both oaks are visible before and after the shape crosses. Neither trunk moves. Something wider than the gap passed through without touching either tree. Kira withdrew from Ohio University 11 days later. Through a mutual contact, I reached her. She confirmed she'd seen it from roughly 40 feet before she ran, standing completely still between the trees, facing her direction. She said the stillness was the worst part. Not movement, not aggression, just absolute stillness. Dennis and Sandra Callahan and their 2 teenage sons had been camping at Hocking Hills for 3 days. Experienced campers. Dennis told me they'd done that specific campsite 4 times in 6 years. He knew every sound that gorge made at night. When something started circling the tent at 11:43 p.m., he knew immediately it didn't belong. It wasn't footsteps. He said this twice. The way people repeat things they know sound wrong, but need you to understand are accurate. It wasn't footsteps. It was a rhythmic, hollow percussion, a heavy thump, a half-second silence, another thump, coming from ground level, moving in a slow arc around the perimeter of their campsite. Even-paced, deliberate, the beat of something that knew exactly where the edges of their space were and was tracing them. It circled them for 20 minutes. Nobody in the tent spoke. Sandra had her hand on Dennis's arm. The boys, both teenagers who had spent the previous 2 days being aggressively unimpressed by nature, were completely silent. 20 minutes of that rhythmic thump, moving around them in the dark, never accelerating, never breaking pattern. And then the weather radio turned on. They hadn't touched it. It was a hand crank emergency unit sitting on the gear bag at the foot of the tent. It powered on by itself. Dennis reached for it instinctively and stopped with his hand an inch away, because underneath the static, woven into it, almost like the static itself was being shaped, was something that was almost a voice. He told Sandra to listen. She heard it too. Both boys heard it. It took them a moment to isolate it from the noise, and then it was impossible to unisolate. 3 words, repeating, not wood, not wood, not wood. The cadence was human. The spacing between repetitions followed the natural pause pattern of spoken English in a way that randomized static simply does not produce. Something was using the radio's frequency to push 3 words into that campsite, on loop for 47 seconds, before the unit cut to silence. The thumping stopped at the same moment the radio went quiet. I've spent a long time with those 2 words, not wood, something announcing what it is not, declaring what the comparison gets wrong. Whatever moves through Bigfoot's body apparently felt strongly enough about the distinction to repeat it twice a second for 47 seconds into a dead radio in a dark gorge in southern Ohio. My name is Idris Alcott. I ran search and rescue operations in western Appalachia for 19 years, and in that time I learned that mountains keep secrets the way small towns do. quietly, collectively, and for a very long time. This particular mountain has been keeping one since October 2016, and I was there when it started. Two things happened in the last 60 days that made staying quiet impossible. The first is that someone is writing a book about Levi Dalton's disappearance. I have seen the outline. It is wrong in ways that will hurt his father, and it names conclusions that the evidence does not support and leaves out the evidence that does. Thomas Dalton has been through enough, and he does not deserve to have his son's story told badly by someone who was never on that mountain. The second thing is that 3 weeks ago, a 17-year-old boy went missing on the same mountain, same month, same terrain. I knew before I picked up the phone what they were going to tell me, and I knew what it meant. I have photographs, audio recordings, physical evidence, and a trail camera card that shows exactly what followed Levi Dalton into those woods that day. Every official body I took it to refused to engage with it. But there is a 15-year-old boy who never came home, and now possibly a 17-year-old one, and I am done letting people call this an unsolved disappearance when I know it was something else entirely. I found terrifying evidence on that mountain that proves a Sasquatch took Levi Dalton, and I should have said that 7 years ago. The call came in at 5:17 p.m., a father reporting his 15-year-old son overdue from a solo hunt on the mountain. I had taken that kind of call before. A kid loses track of time, pushes too far in, gets turned around on the way back. 9 times out of 10, they walk out on their own before we even get the team together. I drove to the trailhead with 4 of my people and got there around 6. Thomas Dalton was standing at the tree line in the same clothes he had been wearing all day, still holding his phone, looking at the mountain like he could see something the rest of us could not. I have been to a lot of trailheads with a lot of families, and I can usually read within the first few minutes whether a case is going to be a long night or something worse. I looked at Thomas Dalton standing at that tree line, and I did not get the feeling it was going to be a long night. I got the feeling it was going to be something worse. Thomas Dalton asked me 2 questions while we stood at that trailhead waiting for the rest of the team to arrive. The first was how long we had before dark. The second was whether I thought his son was still on the mountain. I told him we had about 40 minutes of usable light, and that yes, I believed Levi was still up there. That second answer was honest when I gave it. By the end of the week, I was not so sure. While we waited, Thomas told me one thing about Levi that I have never been able to put down. He said Levi had been drawing that hunting map for 2 years, adding to it every time they went up together, marking the spots where the deer moved, the places where the light came through the trees right at dawn. He said Levi treated that map like it was something worth keeping. Thomas found out later that Levi had taken it with him that morning without telling anyone. He wanted to add to it on his first solo hunt. That is the detail that has stayed with me longer than any piece of evidence I found on that mountain. We went up that night with flashlights and found his boot print in the mud about 1.5 miles in. Then a candy wrapper. Then his water bottle sitting upright against a rock at just past the 2-mile mark, like he had set it down carefully and meant to come back for it. That bothered me more than if we'd found it smashed. After the water bottle, there was nothing. The trail gave us no additional prints, no dropped gear, and no indication that a 15-year-old boy had kept moving through that terrain at all. We pushed until 2 in the morning and came back down with nothing to show Thomas Dalton, except that his son had made it at least 2 miles in, and then the mountain had stopped talking. It did not make sense for a 15-year-old kid to simply stop leaving signs. There is a specific kind of quiet that a mountain has when something is wrong on it, and that mountain had it from the moment we stepped onto the trail. My team felt it too. Nobody said anything about it that night, but I could tell by the way they were moving that they felt it. Search teams get quiet when they're tired. This was different. I know it because by the second hour, nobody was talking like we were trying to find a missing kid anymore. The tracking team arrived on day 2 with 6 dogs. The handler had 22 years of search and rescue behind her and was the best in the region. I had worked with her before, and I trusted her reads completely. The dogs picked up Levi's trail from the trailhead and pushed past where we had stopped the night before, past the water bottle, past the 2-mile mark, further up the mountain than my team had reached. I was maybe 30 yards behind the lead dog when they stopped. All 6 of them stopped at the same point at the same time. 3 of them refused to move forward at all, and the other 3 tried and turned back within a few steps. The handler looked at me, and I looked at her, and neither of us said anything because there was nothing useful to say. In 19 years of search and rescue, I had never seen a full team shut down like that at a single location. There was nothing visible on that trail that should have caused that kind of response in 6 trained animals. She filed it as an extreme fear response, cause undetermined. I signed off on that because at the time, I did not have a better answer. What I did have was the feeling that the dogs knew exactly what was up that mountain and had made a decision that the humans around them were not equipped to make for themselves. That was the moment the search stopped feeling professional and started feeling personal. I had seen fear in search teams before, but never in the dogs. That changed something in me immediately. I left the dogs at the marker and went up alone. I pushed past the 1.8-mile marker alone and worked my way up toward the tree line above it. The terrain got steeper, the trees denser, the light already going flat by the time I reached the upper edge of the tree line. What I found there was not in any search report I filed that day. 4 trees immediately surrounding a small clearing had their bark stripped at a consistent height, roughly 8 feet off the ground. Something had done this deliberately, and whatever did it was tall enough to reach 8 feet without much effort. I stood next to one of the trees and looked up at the stripped section and then looked at the clearing and understood that whatever had done this had been standing there recently. The wood under the stripped bark was still pale and damp. Whatever did it had not been gone long. I photographed everything and went back down. I did not radio it in. I remember looking into that tree line and realizing none of us wanted to find out what was standing up there. On day 3, I started talking to people who lived near the base of that mountain, people who had grown up in the shadow of it and knew it the way you know something you have lived next to your whole life. Every conversation followed the same pattern. I would ask if they had noticed anything unusual on the mountain, and they would go quiet for a moment before answering. It was the quiet of someone deciding how much to say. An old man who had lived on the county road below the mountain. His entire life told me there was a name for what lived up there that his grandfather had used, and his grandfather's father before that. He said everyone in that county knew you did not go up that mountain alone in October. He said it like it has always been true and never needed explaining until someone from outside comes asking. I asked him why October specifically. He looked at me for a moment like he was deciding whether I was worth the full answer. Then he said that October was when it got territorial, and that territorial was putting it mildly. He said his grandfather had a word for what it did to things that wandered into its range that month, and that the word did not translate well into anything I would want to hear. I went back to the search base, and the word territorial stayed with me the rest of that night. He was not the only one who said it. A woman who ran a small farm at the base of the mountain told me her husband went up there one October and came back the same day without his gear and never explained why and never went back. A retired logger who had worked the lower slopes in the 80s told me the crews used to joke about what lived up on the upper ridge until one October when 2 of them heard something moving through the tree line above camp that was large enough to shake the ground, and nobody joked about it after that. Every person I talked to knew. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but they all knew something was wrong with that mountain. On day 4, one of my team radioed in from the upper mountain. Prints in the dried creek mud 2 miles above the marker. I went up myself, 18 inches long, 5 toes, pressed so deep into the ground that whatever made them was carrying serious weight on each foot. My own boot next to one looked like a child's shoe. The stride length told me whatever made these prints had legs built for covering ground fast on steep terrain. 19 years in these mountains, and nothing had ever left a print like that in front of me. I stood there in that creek bed, staring at those prints, and realizing there was no normal explanation left anymore. Further up from the prints, maybe a quarter mile, we found a cluster of trees with their trunks snapped at about 15 feet off the ground. 4 of them in a rough line, all broken at the same height, the wood at the break still pale and fresh. One of my team members said it looked like storm damage and started to move on. I pulled out my radio and checked the weather records for the past 2 weeks. No storm, not even a significant wind event. I logged it as unexplained and watched my team's faces when I said that word out loud. Nobody argued with me. Nobody even tried. In another case, we would have argued about it for an hour. 19 years of working with these people, and they were not the type to let something go without a reasonable explanation. But standing in front of those trees, not one of them pushed back unexplained. They just looked at the breaks and looked at each other and kept moving. Then something moved in the tree line about 40 feet above us. Something large enough that the brush it displaced sounded like a man walking through a doorway. Every one of my team stopped at the same moment. I looked up at the tree line and thought about the prints in the creek bed, and the bark stripped at 8 feet, and the dogs that would not move past the marker. And I remember looking up into that tree line and realizing nobody on the team wanted to keep climbing. We came back down after that, and I reached the trailhead and knew two things. The search was ending, and deep down, I already knew Levi Dalton was never walking back down that mountain. A property owner on the north side of the mountain called the search base while we were still running active searches. He had a trail camera running on October 9th, mounted on a game trail along the upper north face, about 3 miles from where we found the water bottle. He handed me the SD card at his door and told me he did not want to watch it with me. He did not explain why, and I did not ask. I sat at his kitchen table with my laptop and went through 14 hours of footage. Deer moving through at dawn, a turkey around noon, nothing unusual through most of the afternoon. Then at 4:17 p.m., the motion sensor triggered and Levi Dalton walked into the frame, rifle over his shoulder, moving uphill at a steady pace, no sign anything was wrong. He looked like a kid on a good day in the woods. Then I saw what was moving in the tree line behind him. Something massive was moving parallel to him through the trees, tracking him at a consistent distance, staying just outside the clearest range of the frame. Levi never looked back once. That detail has never sat right with me. A kid alone in unfamiliar woods usually checks behind himself eventually. Levi never once did. Why? I went through the footage frame by frame. It was already there in earlier frames, further back, harder to see, moving in the same direction at the same pace. It had been behind him well before the camera caught it. This was not a chance encounter on a trail. I watched that footage 3 times that night. Levi never turned around once. At the time, I thought the trail camera footage was the worst thing I was going to find up there. I was wrong. That point, I already knew I was never going to look at that mountain the same way again. The following morning, I went back up the mountain alone before the rest of the team arrived. I wanted to push further than the official search had gone, and I wanted to do it without having to explain to anyone why. About a mile past the broken trees, I found something wedged inside a split in a tree trunk at about chest height, a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out carefully and opened it, and it was a hand-drawn hunting map. Pencil on notebook paper, trails marked, landmarks noted in a 15-year-old's handwriting. Levi's name written in the top corner, the way kids write their name on schoolwork. That map put Levi on the upper mountain at an elevation the official search never reached. He had made it much further up than the water bottle suggested, and whatever happened to him happened up there, in terrain that none of my teams had covered. I stood in the trees holding that map for a while and thought about a kid who had drawn it at his kitchen table the night before he went hunting and had no idea what was waiting for him up there. Neither did we. I logged it privately and told nobody. Reporting it meant sending my team further up that mountain, and I was not going to do that. I went back up alone 2 days before the official search ended. I had Levi's map and 6 weeks of evidence that all pointed to the upper mountain. I could not close this search without going up there one more time. I reached the area past the broken trees and pushed further north along the ridge. About a half-mile past that point, the wood knocks started. 3 of them, deep and resonant, coming from somewhere in the tree line to my left. I had heard wood knocks before in my research. Hearing them alone on the upper mountain where a 15-year-old boy had disappeared was a different experience entirely. Then the infrasound hit, that pressure in the chest with no obvious source, the feeling that something is wrong before your eyes have confirmed anything. My legs wanted to go back down the trail, and I made myself stay. Then it screamed. One sustained vocalization from somewhere close in the tree line that went on long enough that I had time to understand exactly how close it was and exactly how alone I was up there. I have been in dangerous situations in these mountains before. That was the only time I have ever felt like I was being told in a language older than words that I was not going to walk back down if I stayed where I was. I walked back down and did not stop moving until I reached the trailhead. I did not go back up there alone again for 7 years. I had been on dangerous searches before. I had never once felt like the mountain itself was making a decision about me. The official search closed 2 days later. The decision came from above me, and I did not fight it the way I should have. 6 weeks and 200 volunteers and every resource the county could put together, and all we had to show for it was a water bottle and a candy wrapper. On paper, the case had nothing left to justify the cost of continuing. I signed the closing report because I did not know how to explain in writing why I believed we needed to keep going without also explaining what I believed we were looking for. and I was not ready to put that in a document with my name on it. 3 of my team members never came back to search and rescue after that mountain. I had never seen a case stay with people the way this one did. One of them had been with me for 11 years. He did not explain why he was leaving, and I did not ask because I already knew. The others transferred to different counties within the month. I ran into one of them at a hardware store about a year later, and he looked at me for a moment and then looked away and kept walking. That was the last time I saw him. The morning I drove to Thomas Dalton's house, I sat in my truck at the end of his road for a while before I pulled into the driveway. I had told families hard things before. I had never walked into a house knowing what I knew and planning to say what I was about to say. I told myself I was protecting him. I have not entirely believed that in 7 years. I drove to his house the morning after I filed the report. I sat across from Thomas Dalton at his kitchen table and told him we had done everything we could and that the case would remain open and that if anything new came to light, the sheriff's department would follow up. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment and then he asked me one question. He asked me if I knew what had happened to his son. I have thought about my answer to that question every day for 7 years. I told him I did not know. That was the only lie I have ever told a family in 19 years of search and rescue, and I told it because I did not know how to tell a man sitting in his kitchen that his 15-year-old son had been taken by something that every official body I worked with would not acknowledge existed. He nodded and thanked me for coming and walked me to the door. Before I got to my truck, he called after me. He said he knew I was not telling him everything. He said he could live with that as long as I promised him I was not done looking. I told him he had my word. After the official search closed, I started pulling records on every disappearance reported in and around that mountain, going back as far as the county archives went. What I found was a list that nobody in any official capacity had ever connected into a pattern because nobody had ever looked at them all together. I went in expecting maybe 1 or 2 cases with similar characteristics, something I could point to and say there is a pattern worth investigating. What I found instead was 7 of them, going back to 1976, and I sat in that archive for a long time after I found the last one, just looking at the dates lined up on the table in front of me. 7 disappearances over 40 years, all on or within 2 miles of that mountain, all unsolved, all involving people who had gone into those woods alone. And when I laid them out in chronological order, the thing that stopped me cold was not the number of them. It was when they happened. Every single one of them was in October. I spent a long time trying to find an explanation for the October pattern that did not point where everything else was already pointing. Then I found the indigenous oral traditions. I started digging into older stories tied to the mountain, and one thing kept coming up over and over again. October, people around that area had been quietly avoiding those woods that time of year for generations. A 15-year-old boy from a hunting family in western Appalachia walked into that territory alone on October 9, 2016. He had no idea what October meant on that mountain. Nobody had told him because nobody talked about it to outsiders. And the thing that had been using those woods since before anyone in that county was born was waiting. 7 years after the official search closed, I went back up that mountain at night for the first time. I had a thermal camera, an audio recorder, and 7 years of evidence that I needed one more piece to complete. I reached the upper ridge around 9 and set up the thermal camera facing the tree line to the north. The first 2 hours were quiet. Then, at just past 11, the audio recorder picked up wood knocks. 3 of them from somewhere close in the tree line, the same rhythm I had heard 7 years earlier in the same place. I did not move. I want to be honest about what sitting on that ridge at 11 at night actually felt like. 7 years of evidence had not made me comfortable up there. Knowing what I knew made it worse, not better. I was sitting in the dark on the upper ridge of a mountain where a 15-year-old boy had been taken and something that had been there for generations was standing 60 feet away from me in the tree line, and I was the only person who knew where I was. The infrasound came next. Stronger than anything I had felt on that mountain before, strong enough that my hands were shaking before I understood why. And then the thermal camera picked up a heat signature at the edge of the tree line, large, upright, standing completely still about 60 feet away, looking directly at where I was sitting. We stayed like that for a long time. Then it turned and walked back into the trees, and the wood knocks started again from further away, and then stopped. I pulled the thermal footage when I got back down. The heat signature was over 8 feet tall. I remember staring at the screen and realizing I finally had proof something had been standing up there with us all along. I have looked at a lot of thermal footage over the years, and the outline was clear enough to make out the shoulders, the width of the torso, and arms that hung far too low to look human. It stood completely still for over 4 minutes before turning and walking back into the trees. I showed the footage to 3 people afterward, and every one of them went quiet when they saw it. I have that footage. It is the clearest evidence I have ever captured on that mountain, and it has been sitting in a box with everything else for 2 years, waiting for someone to do something with it. 7 years is a long time to be right about something nobody will acknowledge. I retired 2 years ago, not entirely by choice. When you spend the better part of a decade telling anyone who will listen that a Sasquatch took a 15-year-old boy on a mountain in your county and you have the evidence to back it up, your professional reputation takes a hit that does not fully recover. 2 colleagues I had worked with for over a decade stopped returning my calls. The sheriff who logged Levi's rifle as accidental damage told me at a gas station 3 years after the search that I needed to let it go and that people were starting to talk. I told him people had been dying on that mountain since at least 1976 and that talking was the least of our problems. My ex-wife would tell you this case was a significant factor in our divorce, and she would not be wrong. I kept going back anyway. Every October, I went up that mountain with whatever equipment I could justify buying, and I documented everything I found, and I added it to the box, and I kept looking for the door that would open. After a while, you stop expecting the door to open, and you start doing it, because stopping feels like telling Thomas Dalton that his son did not matter enough to keep going. I was not able to do that. I took the evidence through every official channel I could think of. Every single one of them looked at what I had and chose not to engage with what it meant, not because the evidence was insufficient, because it was inconvenient. I used to think the silence was about skepticism. I do not think that anymore. Every person I took the evidence to understood what they were looking at. The silence was a choice, and the choice was about what acknowledging it would require them to do next. After enough years, you stop mistaking silence for disbelief. The only door that never closed was Thomas Dalton's. He still lives in that house with the same view of the same tree line, and every time I have driven out there over the last 7 years, he has opened the door before I could knock. He knew I was not done. He was not done either. 6 weeks after the official search ended, I got an envelope in the mail at my office. No return address, no note inside, just a single photograph printed on plain paper. It was a trail photograph taken on the upper mountain. I recognized the terrain from my solo walks up there. In the foreground, half buried under leaves and debris, was Levi's rifle. I could see the stock clearly enough to make out the make and model. I had memorized every piece of gear Levi had been carrying when he went up that mountain because that is what you do on a missing persons case. I never found out who sent it, but whoever took that photograph had been standing close enough to the rifle to see the barrel. They had seen what was done to it, and they had still not gone to the sheriff. That told me something about what people in that county were and were not willing to put their names on. I drove up to the location in the photograph the following morning and found the rifle exactly where the picture showed it. It was about 2 miles above where Levi's map put him, deeper into the upper mountain than I had gone on any of my solo walks. I found it half buried under leaves, exactly where the photograph showed it, stock first, like it had been dropped straight down from above. I picked it up and understood immediately that something was wrong with it. The weight was off. For a second, I thought the barrel had snapped, but it hadn't. It had been folded. I turned it over, and that is when I saw what had been done to it. I stood up there on that mountain alone, holding that rifle for a long time. A 15-year-old boy had carried that gun up here for protection. Whatever took him had not been bothered by it in the slightest. The barrel was bent clean in half, not broken, not damaged from a fall. Bent deliberately, folded over like a piece of aluminum foil. Whatever force did that to a steel rifle barrel did it with its hands, and did it without much effort, because there was no other way to produce a bend that clean. I photographed it and brought it straight to local authorities. I laid the rifle on his desk and watched his face while he looked at it. He picked it up, turned it over, set it back down. Then he told me it had probably been damaged in a fall, and that the terrain up there was rough enough to do that kind of thing to equipment. I asked him to show me a fall that bends a steel barrel in half at a clean 90-degree angle without scratching the stock. He did not have an answer for that. He logged it as accidental damage and put it in a box, and that was the last time any official in that county engaged seriously with anything I brought them about Levi Dalton. But I was on that mountain. I found those prints and those broken trees and that rifle with my own hands. I have the trail camera footage and the thermal image and 40 years of October disappearances that nobody has ever officially connected. The evidence does not leave room for another explanation. Levi Dalton was 15 years old when he went up that mountain alone on October 9, 2016, and a Sasquatch took him. The terrifying evidence found on that mountain proves it. On the South Loop Trail of Zaleski State Forest, the victim was Jenna, 35, an experienced solo hiker whose call log showed she'd walked these ridges over 200 times. Her phone survived, and what it recorded is the first hard evidence that something in Ohio has changed. Jenna was filming a video blog for her outdoor channel, the camera steady as she pointed out a creek crossing and the way the trail bent around a stand of mature oak. 6 minutes in, she stopped talking about the route. She mentioned the quiet instead, not the normal stillness of deep woods, but a dead silence where no birds called and no insects buzzed. I reconstructed her path from the GPS metadata. She was roughly 4 miles from the parking lot when she tilted her head and whispered into the microphone that the sound she just heard wasn't any bird. It was knocking, wood on wood. That knocking is the first sign of Bigfoot. Jenna kept the phone up. She panned left, then right, then left again. Between two massive oaks about 40 yards off the trail, the shadows seemed to thicken. Then the shape resolved itself. A dark, hunched figure stood motionless, its shoulders clearing the lower branches at roughly 8.5 feet. The fur matched the bark so perfectly that the eye rejected the outline at first. Jenna laughed. She said it was probably just a bear, but her breathing had already changed. Shorter inhales, longer exhales, the body preparing for flight. She kept recording for 12 more seconds, just her breath and the faint rustle of her jacket. Then the forest answered. A low, guttural whoop erupted from directly behind her, so close that the phone's microphone peaked into distortion. Bigfoot that had been standing between the oaks hadn't moved. That meant a second Bigfoot had circled behind Jenna while she watched the first one. The whoop lasted 2 full seconds, a sound that vibrates through the audio file like a diesel engine revving inside a concrete room. The phone flew upward. Jenna never screamed. The video shows a spinning blur of leaves and sky, and then a massive fur-covered arm reaching through the frame from the bottom edge. That arm belonged to Bigfoot behind her. From the scale of the oak leaves in the background, I calculated the arm's length at over 5 feet from shoulder to knuckle. The fingers were already curling into a fist. The arm wasn't grabbing, it was swinging. The video cut to black, but the audio continued for another 47 minutes. The first sound after impact was a wet crack, the same forensic signature I've heard in cases where a human skull meets a steel beam at speed. Jenna's breathing stopped instantly. Then came the heavy drag. Bigfoot pulled her body across the forest floor, the phone recording every root snag and every rock scrape. Each dragging interval lasted roughly 8 seconds, followed by 2 seconds of silence, where I could hear Bigfoot adjusting its grip. The huffing was rhythmic, one exhale every 3 seconds, the lung capacity of an animal that weighed well over 600 pounds. 23 minutes into the audio, a second Bigfoot vocalized from the east. The whoop was lower in pitch, almost interrogative. The first Bigfoot answered with a series of short grunts, and the dragging changed direction. The body was being pulled toward the second Bigfoot. I mapped the change in ambient sound, more leaf litter, fewer stones, and determined that the new heading was downhill, toward a ravine that local hunters avoid because dogs refuse to enter it. 31 minutes in, the dragging stopped. Bigfoot huffed 3 times in quick succession, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of something large feeding in the dark, not tearing, not chewing. The audio showed a pattern of sustained, wet ripping, followed by 2 seconds of swallowing, then another rip. Each rip lasted approximately 4 seconds. The consistency suggests Bigfoot was opening the chest cavity. A human body has natural separation points between the ribs. Bigfoot knew exactly where to pull. At 39 minutes, the feeding paused. Bigfoot made a sound I can only describe as a low, vibrating hum, something between a growl and a purr. Then the second Bigfoot approached. I could hear its footsteps, each one separated by a 6-foot stride, the weight-crushing leaves with a dull crunch. The 2 Bigfoot vocalized back and forth for nearly 2 minutes. The first one's hum dropped in pitch. The second one answered with a series of soft clicks. Then they both fed at the same time. The audio became a stereo field of wetwork, ripping on the left channel, crunching on the right, the 2 Bigfoot working opposite ends of the same body. 44 minutes. One of Bigfoot stepped directly onto the phone. The microphone compressed into the soil and the audio turned muffled and distant, but it still recorded. For the final 3 minutes, I heard Bigfoot dragging something heavier than a single body. The second Bigfoot had joined the pull. Their footsteps synchronized, the weight distribution suggesting they were carrying Jenna's remains between them. Then the audio ended. They had moved beyond the phone's range, deeper into the ravine. The phone was found 3 days later, crushed but recoverable. Jenna's body has never been located. She was the first of 8 in 5 days. Something is happening in Ohio, and Bigfoot is no longer content to knock on trees and fade into the bark. In the Pleasant Hill Dam area of Mohican Memorial State Forest, the second-day victims were 3 15-year-olds, Caleb, Mia, and Jordan, out for a birthday hike on a sunny October afternoon. Their case holds the strangest evidence I've reviewed. Not a single frame of trail cam footage shows the teenagers themselves. Instead, the cameras captured Bigfoot walking toward an empty forest, and yet the physical remains tell a story of 3 people being eaten alive right there. The hunter's cellular trail cam was strapped to a tree overlooking a creek bed, aimed at a sycamore and a patch of ferns. 6 seconds of footage, no audio. Second one shows an empty forest, the sycamore's white bark standing out against the brown undergrowth. Second 2, a massive dark shape begins to emerge from behind the sycamore, moving with a slow, deliberate care that suggests Bigfoot knew exactly where the camera was. The color is gray-brown, the fur matted in patches like wet bark. Second 3, Bigfoot is fully visible. I've scaled it against the sycamore's trunk, a tree with a known diameter of 22 inches. Bigfoot stands just over 9 feet tall, shoulders hunched forward in a way that adds another foot to its reach, arms hanging past its knees. Second 4, 1 step closer. The head lifts. Sunken eyes sit deep under a sloping brow ridge, and there is no visible neck, just a wedge of muscle connecting skull to torso. Second 5, another step. The face becomes distinguishable. A scarred ridge of tissue runs over the left eye socket, the hair gone in that spot, revealing gray skin beneath. The jaw hangs slightly open. Second 6, a third step. The frame fills with Bigfoot's torso, a wall of fur and muscle. Then static. The footage ends. No hikers appear in any of those 6 seconds. Bigfoot was walking toward the creek bed where, according to witness statements, Caleb, Mia, and Jordan had stopped to eat lunch at 2:15 p.m. The missing persons report confirms the 3 teenagers never returned home. Their parents called at 9:47 p.m. Searchers found the site within 4 hours. The physical evidence tells me Bigfoot didn't stalk them. It simply arrived. 3 day packs lay scattered within a 50-foot radius of the creek bed. One pack, Caleb's, was crushed flat as if stepped on by something weighing well over 600 pounds. The fabric hadn't torn. It had compressed, the zippers still zipped, the water bottle inside reduced to shards. Another pack, Mia's, was ripped open with a violence that pulled the seams apart rather than cutting them. A water bottle, granola bars, and a phone were strewn across the ground in a pattern consistent with a single sweeping motion. The third pack, Jordan's, was intact but pinned under a fallen branch measuring 8 feet long and 6 inches thick. I cross-referenced the local weather. No wind that day. The branch didn't fall. It was placed. Near the creek, a flat rock roughly 3 feet across bore a massive bloodstain covering 2 square feet. On the same rock, I found 3 distinct bite marks, each approximately 2 inches in diameter, pressed deep into the stone's surface. Not scratches, not dents. The rock had fractured around each bite. Forensic analysis confirmed human bone fragments embedded in the impressions, specifically fragments of a human femur and tibia. The bite force required to mark stone has been estimated at over 1,600 pounds per square inch. That is not a bear. That is not a mountain lion. That is a Bigfoot biting through a 15-year-old's leg bone and leaving a record of its tooth pattern in solid rock. 50 feet up a mature white oak, searchers found a single half-eaten hiking boot, size 7, male, matching Caleb's footwear. The boot was wedged between 2 branches, measuring just 1.2 inches in diameter. I've climbed enough trees to know that no human could have placed it there. The branches would have snapped under 150 pounds, let alone whatever weight carried that boot up. On the same tree, at 15 feet high, the bark showed 3 deep parallel gouges. Each gouge was spaced roughly 4 inches apart. I held a cast of those gouges next to a cast of Bigfoot's fingerprints from another case. The match was perfect. Bigfoot climbed that tree, boot in mouth, and left its claw marks on the way up. The clearest evidence came from the mud leading away from the rock. A single footprint cast measured 17 inches long, 8 inches wide at the heel, with 5 distinct toe impressions. The stride length between steps was 6.5 feet. That stride carried Bigfoot toward a steep ravine about 40 yards east. But at the ravine edge, searchers found something else. 3 separate handprints pressed into the mud, each one small, consistent with teenage hands. The fingers were splayed wide, the palm heels dug deep, as if each person had tried to stop themselves from being dragged forward. Beyond those handprints, no further human tracks, no footprints, no knee prints, no signs of struggle. Only the 17-inch prints continued, one after another, descending into the ravine. The lead investigator's final note on the report reads as I paraphrase it: 3 hikers, 1 trail cam that caught nothing but a Bigfoot walking toward an empty frame, and yet the evidence shows they were killed and consumed right there on that rock. The lead investigator wrote that he doesn't know how something that big moves that fast, but it does. Bigfoot that took Caleb, Mia, and Jordan didn't chase them. It simply arrived, fed, and walked away. The handprints at the ravine edge tell me the teenagers saw it coming. They had time to brace, and it didn't matter. The 3rd day of Bigfoot's spree was on the Boston Run Trail in Cuyahoga Valley National Park. The victim was Maya, 26, a competitive trail runner who logged over 70 miles a week on these very paths, but this time she wouldn't return. The only evidence in the case came from her sister, a phone call that lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds, before dissolving into something I've had to rebuild from cellular metadata and acoustic forensics. The evidence paints a clear picture. Maya was running a route she knew cold when something locked onto her. The call came in at 6:42 p.m. Maya's sister answered to the sound of heavy breathing, not from exertion alone, but from something closer to panic. Maya was gasping out words between strides, her pace audibly faster than a casual jog. She said something was tracking her through the trees to her right, staying exactly parallel no matter how she adjusted her line. She described it as not a deer, because deer bolt when a human sprints. This thing was holding formation. Maya pushed her pace to a 6-minute mile, flat-out racing speed on uneven forest trail, and the shape in the timber just kept matching her, step for step, branch for branch. Then her sister heard it. Behind Maya's breathing, behind the crunch of her trail shoes on gravel and leaf litter, came a second set of footfalls, heavy, bipedal. The rhythm was unmistakable. 2 slow, powerful strides for every one of Maya's rapid steps. Each footfall landed with a low thud that vibrated through the phone's microphone, the kind of weight that compresses soil and fractures roots. I've analyzed the cadence against Maya's reported 6-minute mile pace. For a human to match that speed, the stride length would need to exceed 5 feet. This Bigfoot was taking strides of nearly 8 feet, covering ground with an economy of motion that should not be possible for a creature its size. Maya whispered, not spoke, not yelled, whispered, as if saying the word too loudly would bring it down on her. She said the word Bigfoot, and in that whisper, I hear the final moment when denial gives way to certainty. Her sister started shouting into the phone, telling Maya to get off the trail, to climb a rock face, to do anything. But the footfalls behind Maya had changed. They were no longer 2 beats for every one of hers. They were closing, 1 beat for every stride, then 1 beat for every 2 of hers. Bigfoot was accelerating. Then the call flooded with static, not the crackle of a dropped signal or the hiss of distance. This was a roar of digital noise, rhythmic and pulsing, surging and receding at a rate of roughly 1 cycle per second. Forensic audio specialists have identified this signature before. It matches the waveform of infrasound, frequencies below the range of human hearing, but felt in the chest as pressure and in the brain as raw animal terror. Bigfoot was not just chasing Maya, it was broadcasting a low-frequency pulse that would have locked her joints, slowed her thoughts, turned her flight into a stagger. Her sister heard Maya yell, "No." Then the stomp. The audio texts describe it as a pumpkin being dropped from a 2-story window, that wet, explosive collapse of something hollow and fluid-filled. I've listened to the cleaned-up version. It's the sound of a human rib cage caving in under a single downward strike. Bigfoot did not need to chase Maya down. It had already matched her pace for nearly half a mile. When it finally closed the gap, it ended the pursuit with one blow. The line went dead at 6:47 p.m., but the phone did not. Cell tower pings tracked Maya's device for another 7 minutes, traveling roughly 4 miles off any marked trail. I mapped the trajectory. The phone moved south-southwest, crossing 2 creek beds and a ridgeline that requires scrambling over a 15-foot sandstone ledge. No human body being dragged could cover that terrain in 7 minutes, but a Bigfoot could. The ping intervals show acceleration, faster and faster, as Bigfoot carried the phone deeper into the park's undeveloped eastern section. Then the pings stopped. Not a slow fade, an abrupt termination. The phone either destroyed or buried. Maya's body has never been found. Her phone has never been found. The only thing that remains is the call, the static, the stomp, and the 7-minute ghost trail of a Bigfoot carrying evidence away from human eyes. In Shawnee State Forest, known as the Little Smokies of Ohio, the victims were Lauren, 38, and her 13-year-old son, Eli. They had planned a bonding hike, a 3-day trek through the most remote terrain in southern Ohio. Search teams found Lauren's day pack within 48 hours, placed on a fallen log with almost ceremonial precision. No tears in the fabric, no scattered contents, just the pack, upright, untouched. Beside it sat a can of bear spray, and that told the real story. The bear spray can was completely empty. Not partially discharged, not leaking. Every ounce of capsaicin had been expelled in a single sustained burst. Around the can, the ground showed a dark, scorched arc of dried spray, radiating outward in a perfect semicircle, roughly 15 feet in diameter. I reconstructed the spray pattern from the forensic photos. The arc suggests Lauren stood her ground, aimed the can, and swept it across a target that was moving laterally in front of her. She did everything right. She waited until Bigfoot was within 20 feet. She depressed the trigger and held it down. The spray pattern shows no flinch, no panic drift. Lauren knew how to use bear spray, but inside that arc, pressed into the mud of the trail, was a single footprint, 17 inches long from heel to toe. The cast shows clear dermal ridges, the friction ridges of a Bigfoot's foot, the same unique swirls that human fingerprints have. No boot tread, no flat impressions. Actual skin. Bigfoot had walked directly through the cloud of burning chemicals and never broken stride. The spray did nothing. Not a cough, not a blink, not a flinch. Bigfoot simply passed through the hot orange cloud as if it were morning mist. The footprint faces the direction of the can, meaning Bigfoot advanced on Lauren while she emptied the entire can into its face. 30 feet from the day pack, a mature oak tree had been peeled of its bark from 2 feet above ground up to 10 feet high. I measured the scars. The bark removal was not random, it was systematic. A single massive creature reaching up and dragging its back against the trunk with enough force to shred the outer layer down to bare wood. The claw marks were spaced 6 inches apart, consistent with the finger spread of a hand that spans nearly 14 inches across the palm. The height of the peeled section confirms Bigfoot's shoulder clearance at over 8 feet. This was not territorial marking. This was a scratch. Bigfoot had used the tree the way a black bear uses a pine, rubbing against it to relieve an itch or to deposit scent. But the force required to strip bark from a mature oak at that height is beyond any bear. Bigfoot had leaned its full weight into that trunk and dragged downward, leaving fur caught in the fresh wood fibers. Search teams reported a smell clinging to the entire area. Wet fur, not the musky odor of a dog or the sharp tang of a bear, but something deeper, almost like a horse that has been standing in rain for days. Underneath that, rotting meat, the sweet, sickly smell of decomposition that hangs in the air and coats the back of the throat. The odor persisted for 3 days after the search teams first arrived, even after rain moved through the forest. I've talked to forest rangers who worked bear kills and mountain lion scavenges. None of them had ever encountered a smell that lingered through a rainstorm. Eli's ball cap was found inside a hollow log 40 yards from the day pack. The log was an old sycamore, split open along its length, the interior chamber just wide enough for a 13-year-old boy to curl into. The cap was not tossed in. It was crushed into a perfect bowl shape, the brim folded under, the crown compressed down until the fabric was as flat as a pressed flower. The force required to crush a baseball cap into that shape without tearing the stitching is specific. Something had pressed the cap down with steady, even pressure. Not a grab, not a twist, but a deliberate flattening. I reconstructed the scene from the impressions. Bigfoot had removed Eli's cap, placed it inside the log, and then pushed down with the heel of its hand until the cap conformed to the curve of the wood. No blood on the cap, no hair, no tissue, just the faint smell of wet fur pressed into the cotton. No bodies were ever found. The search teams expanded their grid to a 2-mile radius and found nothing. No drag marks, no disturbed leaf litter beyond the immediate area of the pack and the tree. It was as if Lauren and Eli had simply stopped existing at that spot. But the bear spray can told me they fought. The footprint told me Bigfoot walked through their best defense without even slowing down. The peeled tree told me Bigfoot was comfortable here at home, treating the forest like its own living room. And the crushed ball cap told me that somewhere in these woods, a 13-year-old boy was close enough to his mother that Bigfoot had to remove his hat before it took him. She emptied a whole can of spray into that creature's face. Bigfoot took her son anyway. Then it came back for her. In Wayne National Forest's Wildcat Hollow, the final victim was Eleanor, 68, a retired biologist with 40 years of field experience who knew the difference between animal sign and human interference. She had been documenting fungi for a local mycology club when she wandered off trail near a cluster of sandstone boulders. Her journal was found 3 days later, wedged between 2 roots, and the last entry tells me everything about what she saw. The handwriting starts firm but grows shakier with each line, the pen pressing harder into the page as if her hand was trembling. Eleanor wrote that something had been watching her since noon. She had mistaken it for a boulder at first, just another moss-covered rock in the jumble of talus. Then the boulder blinked. The creature rose from its crouch, and Eleanor estimated its height at 8 feet of an inch. She was a biologist. She did not exaggerate measurements. She wrote that this was not an animal, but an executioner, and the word choice chills me because it implies intent. Animals kill to eat. Executioners kill because they have been ordered to. Eleanor asked whoever found the journal to tell the rangers that she saw the alpha, a Bigfoot with a scar over its left eye, and that it was not alone. The journal ends there, the final letters trailing off as if she closed the notebook mid-thought. Outside, 70 yards from where the journal was found, search teams discovered a structure that does not belong in any natural forest. A nest of broken saplings woven together into a bowl shape roughly 6 feet across and 3 feet deep. The saplings were green wood, snapped off at the base with a twisting motion, then bent and interlaced in a pattern that required hand strength far beyond any known primate in North America. Bigfoot had built this nest recently. The leaves on the broken branches had not yet wilted. Inside the nest, the evidence turned from strange to horrific. Eleanor's glasses, folded neatly, the lenses unbroken. Her left boot removed cleanly with the laces still tied, meaning the foot had been pulled out rather than the boot untied, and a fragment of her titanium hip replacement chewed into a crumpled ball the size of a walnut. Titanium has a tensile strength of over 100,000 pounds per square inch. Bigfoot had bitten down on that metal implant with enough force to deform it permanently. Human bite marks cannot do that. Bear bite marks cannot do that. The dentition pattern on the crumpled ball shows large, blunt cusps spaced roughly an inch apart, the molar row of a Bigfoot. 100 yards from the nest, Eleanor's camera stood on its tripod, still recording. The battery had run down to 3% by the time searchers found it, but the memory card held 47 minutes of footage. I've reviewed the entire file. The first 30 minutes show Eleanor setting up the camera, adjusting the angle, and then walking away from it toward the boulder field. Her movements are normal at first, purposeful, scientific, the gait of someone surveying a transect. But around the 32-minute mark, something changes. Eleanor reappears from behind a large sandstone outcropping, and her posture is wrong. Her arms hang at her sides, not swinging with her stride. Her head is tilted slightly upward, her eyes fixed on something above the camera's frame. She walks past the tripod without acknowledging it, heading directly toward the nest. The footage shows Eleanor walking willingly. That is the word I have to use, because there is no rope, no weapon, no threat visible in the frame. Her arms are outstretched now, palms forward, the posture of someone approaching a ledge or a cliff edge with full knowledge of what waits below. Her mouth is moving, but the camera's microphone was too far away to pick up words. She reaches the edge of the nest and stops. For 3 seconds, she stands there, arms still out, head still tilted. Then she steps forward into the bowl of broken saplings, and she does not step back out. The final 12 seconds of footage are why I cannot stop thinking about this case. A massive face fills the frame from the left side, moving so smoothly that the camera does not register a shake. Bigfoot has inserted itself between the lens and Eleanor's last known unknown position. The face is not the flat, ape-like reconstruction from old drawings. It is broad, with a pronounced brow ridge that casts deep shadows over the eyes. The left eye is partially closed by a thick scar that runs from the forehead down across the eyelid and onto the cheekbone. The scar is pale against the dark fur, healed long ago, but still visible as a raised line of tissue. No threat display, no bared teeth. Just a slow, deliberate head tilt, the same gesture a human makes when examining something unfamiliar. Then the camera goes dead. The battery had power remaining. The memory card was not full. Bigfoot turned the camera off. By day 5, the Rangers had 8 missing persons across 5 separate crime scenes, all within Ohio. I reviewed the victim profiles. The female victims range from 26 to 68. The male victims are all children. No adult men have been taken. That pattern tells me something that the footprints and the nests and the chewed titanium do not. Bigfoot are selecting. They are not attacking every human they encounter. They are choosing specific targets. And the alpha, the scarred Bigfoot that Eleanor identified, is the common denominator across multiple scenes. Witnesses in 2 other instances described a large Bigfoot with a facial scar, always appearing just before the attack escalated. The question that keeps me up is not whether the alpha is doing this alone. The question is, how many more are following its orders? On May 24, 2026, Bigfoot took me into the woods, and I didn't come home for 10 days. I woke up in a place where my survival depended entirely on the creature that had put me there. Eventually, I found myself preparing for an escape, knowing there was an extremely high chance it would cost me my life. My name is Jessica Trahan. I'm 31 and I work in logistics. Most of my days are spreadsheets, timelines, phone calls, and people needing things done immediately. It's the kind of job that doesn't really end when you leave the office. It just follows you home and waits for you there. By the time that weekend rolled around, I was exhausted. I'd been running on caffeine, takeout, and maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night for weeks. 2 of my friends had been trying to get me out of the house for a while. Eventually, I gave in. The plan was to spend a few hours on the trail and get away from work for a bit. My friends were coming from farther away, so I got there first and figured I'd start walking while I waited for them to catch up. It was a Saturday morning in late May. The weather was perfect, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could actually breathe. Standing there, I remember thinking that getting outside had been the best decision I'd made in a long time. But before the day was over, I'd be taken by something that wasn't human. My 2 friends arrived at the trailhead about an hour after I headed in. They expected to catch up with me on the trail, but when they couldn't find me, they started calling my name and trying my phone. After checking side trails and waiting for hours at the trailhead, they realized something was wrong. By the time anyone official was looking for me, I was already somewhere no search party was going to find easily. I guess if there's a lesson in all of this, it's that I should have just stayed at my desk. I hadn't done much hiking before this. A few easy trails here and there, but nothing that required much planning. For this trip, I did a little research, borrowed a backpack from a friend, and packed what seemed sensible: water, snacks, a small knife I'd had for years, bear spray, an emergency whistle, a headlamp, and one of those foil emergency blankets they sell near the checkout of outdoor stores. I also brought my phone and a small camera. I wanted to film parts of the hike and have something to look back on afterward. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It took me a second to realize what felt wrong. The birds were gone. I couldn't remember when I'd last heard them, only that at some point the forest had gone completely quiet. I slowed down and put my camera away. I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, something felt off. Then I saw the print. It was bigger than anything I'd ever seen. My entire boot fit inside it, and there was still room around the edges. It wasn't a bear track. It wasn't anything I recognized. Once I started looking, I found more. Same shape, same size, same depth. They ran parallel to the trail instead of crossing it. Whatever had made them had been moving in the same direction I was moving, close enough that I should have heard it. That's when I realized it hadn't passed through before I got there. It had been beside me. I ran. My pack bounced against my back, my camera swung from my wrist, and I nearly lost my footing more than once, but I didn't slow down. I just wanted distance between me and whatever had been following me through those trees. Then, underneath the sound of my own footsteps, I heard something else. Heavy footsteps, moving through the trees to my right. I cut off the trail and into the woods, convinced I could lose it if I stayed out of sight. I ducked behind a cluster of trees and listened. My legs were shaking, my heart was pounding, and for a moment I thought I'd gotten away. Then I heard footsteps somewhere to my left. Whatever was out there wasn't searching for me. It was moving through the trees at an easy pace, like it already knew where I was. I took off again and eventually broke back onto the trail. I kept looking for something, anything. Another hiker, a ranger, a road, some sign that the normal world still existed beyond those trees. Instead, all I saw was more forest. And every so often, I would hear it moving out there with me. I stopped when I couldn't run anymore, bent over with my hands on my knees, trying to pull air into my lungs. As my breathing started to settle, I let myself believe I'd finally lost it. Then my phone rang. It was my friends. I answered without thinking. Hearing their voices felt like grabbing hold of something real again. They were asking where I was, why I wasn't answering my phone, whether I was okay. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I had no idea where I was. I started looking around, trying to get my bearings, scanning the trees and the trail. That's when I saw it, standing between the trees maybe 20 feet away. The longer I looked at it, the more one detail sank in. It had been there before I stopped. It hadn't chased me into that spot. It had been waiting there the whole time. I hadn't been running from it. I'd been running toward it. I could still hear my friends' voices coming through the phone, but they sounded far away. Nothing they were saying mattered anymore. I turned and ran for my life. What happened next couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds. Something that large should not have been able to move that fast. I had barely made it down the trail before it closed the distance. One moment, it was behind me, and the next, my feet weren't touching the ground anymore. The world seemed to lurch sideways. Trees blurred past. Branches snapped. I kicked, twisted, and fought as hard as I could, but it didn't matter. I might as well have been fighting a landslide. I remember one completely ridiculous thought cutting through the panic. I still had my backpack on. For some reason, that was what my brain chose to focus on, while everything else was falling apart. My friends were still shouting through the phone. I could hear them calling my name, demanding to know what was happening. Then the forest swallowed every other sound, and after that, everything changed. I focused on staying conscious. That was the only thing that mattered. I couldn't get a good look at it from the way I was being carried. I was mostly aware of its size, the heat coming off it, and the fact that I wasn't going anywhere unless it decided otherwise. The grip wasn't painful, but it was impossible to fight. I tried once anyway. It adjusted its hold without slowing down or showing the slightest sign of effort, and that was enough to make me stop. After that, I just watched the forest slide past and tried to pay attention to anything that might matter later. The direction we were moving, the angle of the sun, the way the trees seemed to grow thicker the deeper we went. I kept thinking about my friends. By then, they were probably arriving at the trailhead, expecting to find me somewhere up the trail. I wondered how long it would take before they realized I wasn't coming back. How long before concern turned into panic? How long before anyone started looking for me at all? By the time it finally stopped, the light had changed. The forest felt darker, denser, and far removed from the trail I'd started on that morning. We had covered a lot of ground, more than I wanted to think about. It set me down inside what I can only describe as a den. It looked like a natural formation, with rock walls on 3 sides and an opening on the 4th that was partially blocked by fallen timber. At first, I assumed the logs had fallen there naturally, but the longer I looked, the more it seemed like they had been dragged into place. The ceiling was low and the floor was packed with earth that had been flattened over a long period of time. This wasn't a place something had stumbled across recently. It had been used before, over and over again, and whatever had been used wasn't small. I sat up and looked around. The smell hit me first. It was dense and animal, with an old stale quality that seemed to cling to the back of my throat. Enough light came through the entrance to see by, but not enough to make out every detail. The first thing I did was check myself over. Nothing seemed broken. My backpack was still on, which felt like the only piece of good news I'd had in the last hour. I pulled my knees to my chest and stared at the entrance. It wasn't blocked. As far as I could tell, I could have stood up and walked straight out. The problem was that every instinct I had was telling me not to. I couldn't explain why, but I was certain it was still nearby. The opening felt less like an escape route and more like a test. So I stayed where I was, sitting against the rock wall, listening to the forest outside, and trying to think clearly about what had happened to me and what I was going to do next. My 2 friends had been on that trail for hours by the time they accepted that something was seriously wrong. They'd heard everything on that phone call, the running, the screaming, and then the sudden silence. Neither of them was willing to leave without at least trying to find me. They went in after me. One of them had the foresight to mark the trail as they searched, breaking branches at eye level and tying strips of fabric to trees every so often. It was a simple idea, but a smart one. Later, it would probably be the reason they made it back out without creating a second emergency for the people who eventually came looking for me. They found my camera first. Not long after that, they found the tracks. They followed them deeper into the forest than they probably should have, driven by the hope that they were getting closer to me. That changed when they got a good look at the prints. The size, the depth, and the distance between each step didn't make sense. Whatever had left them was far larger than anything either of them expected to find in those woods. That was the point where they made the right decision. They turned around, followed their markers back to the trailhead, and went for help. Before they left, one of them stood in the parking lot and stared at the tree line for a long time. I don't know what they were thinking about. I only know that by then, I was already far beyond where anyone was looking. Getting help wasn't as straightforward as it should have been. They reported what they'd seen. The phone call, the screaming, the tracks, and the response they got was careful and measured in a way that didn't match the urgency of what they were describing. A missing person report couldn't be filed until 24 hours had passed. That was the rule. They were told to go home, stay reachable, and wait. They didn't go home. They drove to my family instead. What happened after that is really their story, not mine. What I do know is that my family was on the phone making calls within the hour, pushing every contact they had, and refusing to wait 24 hours before doing something. By the next morning, I was officially a missing person. The search started the following day. They set up a base camp at the trailhead. There were search teams, dogs, radios, and organized grid searches. Day after day, teams came back with nothing that led anywhere. My family stayed at that camp, my friends too. They were all out there looking for me while I was less than a day's walk away in a place nobody was ever going to find by accident. That's the part that stays with me, how close I was and how completely unreachable. It came back before dark. I heard it before I saw it, that displacement of sound that comes with something very large moving through trees. It ducked through the entrance and filled the space in a way that made the den feel suddenly much smaller. I pressed myself against the wall and watched. It didn't look at me immediately. It moved to the other side and crouched, and for a few minutes it simply stayed there, breathing like an animal settling in after a long day. Then it turned and looked directly at me. I had seen it in motion during the carry, pieces of it, impressions. This was different. This close, in the low gray light filtering through the entrance, it was fully real in a way my brain had been refusing to accept since the trail. Broad, heavy-browed, dark eyes that caught the light in a way that didn't feel like an animal's eyes. I reached slowly into my pack and wrapped my hand around the bear spray. It had seemed like a smart thing to bring that morning. Looking at it now, I wasn't sure the manufacturer had this situation in mind, so I didn't end up using it. The den was too enclosed. Whatever it did to something that size in a space that small, I'd feel it too. I let go and sat very still and held its gaze because looking away felt worse than not looking away. My phone still had some battery left that first night. Not much. I'd spent the morning filming and taking pictures, and by then the battery was already low. Still, it was enough to try. I turned the brightness all the way down and called anyway. There was no signal. I moved around the den, holding the phone up in different places, watching the screen and hoping something would change. Nothing did. I tried more than once, but every call went nowhere. The whole time, it was watching me. I don't know if it understood what the phone was, but it was paying attention. Every movement seemed to catch its attention, so I kept myself slow and careful. Later, when it seemed to settle down, I turned away and curled around the phone so the screen light wouldn't be visible. Then I recorded a voice message as quietly as I could. I said my name, the date, and everything I could remember about where I'd been before I was taken. I didn't let myself cry. I was too afraid of drawing attention to myself. I just said what I needed to say, saved the recording, and hoped someone might hear it one day. By the next morning, the battery was gone. I'd spent too much time checking for signal and making sure the recording had been saved. The screen went black and never came back on. After that, I had nothing. No phone, no light, no way to contact anyone. Just the den, the entrance, and whatever daylight managed to make its way inside. The first time I really saw its face was on the second day. It came back sometime that morning and, instead of going straight to its usual spot, stopped a few feet from where I was sitting. My back was already against the rock wall, so there was nowhere for me to go. I stayed still, tried to keep my breathing steady, and waited. It was enormous up close in a way that I hadn't fully understood before. During the carry, I'd only caught glimpses of it through panic and confusion. This was different. The face was broad and heavy-browed, covered in dark hair except around the eyes and across the bridge of the nose. The eyes were what I kept coming back to. They were dark, steady, and focused in a way that felt wrong for an animal. I don't know how else to describe it. There was an awareness there that I still have trouble putting into words. It looked at me for a long time. I looked back because, for some reason, looking away felt like a mistake. We just sat there watching each other in silence until it finally turned and walked away. That was it. No aggression or any sound, no sudden movement, just a long look, as though it was trying to figure something out. And then it lost interest. I remember sitting there afterward trying to decide whether that interaction had made me feel safer or more afraid. On the second day, it arrived with something and set it down in the space between us. Then it sat back and watched. The food itself, I don't know exactly what it was. Some kind of meat. I just stared at it. I was hungry, but I was also scared out of my mind. The longer it sat there, the less comfortable I got. It was obvious I wasn't touching it. After a while, it sat forward and let out a low rumble. Then it reached out and shoved the food a little closer to me. I still couldn't bring myself to eat it. Eventually, I picked it up and made it look like I had. Then I wrapped it and shoved it into my pack when it wasn't paying attention. That seemed good enough. It eventually got up and left, and I remember feeling strangely relieved that I'd gotten through whatever that interaction had been. The next time it brought food, it watched me too closely for that. Every time I moved, its eyes followed me. I tried waiting it out, but it didn't leave. It just sat there watching. By then, I had the feeling that refusing wasn't an option I could keep testing. So I ate. When I finished, something about its posture changed. Not much, but enough for me to notice. It settled back almost immediately. That was when I realized there was some kind of logic to what was happening. It expected certain things from me. I just didn't know what they were yet. By the third day, I had stopped thinking about escape every second. Not because I'd given up, but constantly running through plans in my head was exhausting, and I needed whatever energy I had left for things that might actually help. So I started paying attention differently, not just to it, but to everything around me. The entrance, the rock walls, the fallen timber partially blocked the opening. I noticed that it had to crouch to get through, and I kept wondering whether that might matter if I ever got a chance to run. I studied the den the same way I would have studied a problem at work, looking for anything I'd missed the first time. I also started watching its routine, when it left, when it came back, how long it stayed gone. At first, none of it made much sense. Some days it was gone for what felt like hours. Other times, it would leave and come back much sooner. There didn't seem to be any obvious pattern. Still, I kept watching. I needed something to work with, and by then, I'd convinced myself that if I paid close enough attention, sooner or later, I'd find it. I just had to stay alive long enough to figure it out. It was around day 5 that I started looking at the den itself differently. For the first few days, I'd been focused on the entrance, on it, and on anything that seemed connected to getting out. I hadn't paid much attention to the den itself. When I finally did, I started noticing things I should have noticed earlier. The walls had markings on them, not carvings exactly, more like places where the rock had been worn smooth over time. Certain parts of the floor were packed down harder than others, almost forming a path between the entrance and the far corner. None of it looked recent. This place had been used for a long time. Then I found the hoodie. It was half buried under debris in the far corner, pushed against the wall like it had been there for a while. Dark gray, youth-sized. There was a school logo on the front from a town I recognized, maybe a couple of hours from where I'd parked that morning. Up until then, I'd been trying to survive. After that, I was trying to get out. I kept the hoodie on after that, told myself it was for warmth, and left it at that. The markings on the wall stayed in the back of my mind, though. Over the next few days, I found myself studying them whenever it was gone. Some looked like nothing more than worn spots in the rock, but others seemed too deliberate to ignore. Not language, at least not anything I recognized, but marks that had been made on purpose and over a long period of time. The hoodie bothered me too, because it meant someone had been here before me. By day 6, I was sitting there wearing a stranger's hoodie and staring at markings that nobody outside those woods had probably ever seen. That's when a thought finally settled in. This wasn't random. I hadn't just wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. Something had noticed me, followed me, and taken me. By day 7, I finally had something to work with. The pattern wasn't perfect, but it was there. The longest stretches when it was gone seemed to happen in the early morning before the sunlight reached very far into the den. Not every day, but often enough that I started paying close attention. A few mornings it had been gone for what felt like hours. By day 7, it left before sunrise and didn't come back until the den was bright enough to see clearly. For the first time since I'd been taken, I started thinking seriously about getting out. There wasn't much I could do to prepare. Everything I had was what I'd arrived with. The knife, the bear spray, the whistle, the lighter. I went over each one in my head. The whistle was probably my best chance if I got far enough away. The lighter might help if things went badly. The knife was there because it had to be, not because I thought it would do much good. I decided I was going to wait until day 9. I wanted one more morning to make sure I wasn't imagining the pattern. One more chance to be certain before I bet everything on it. That night, for the first time in a week, I went to sleep with something that felt like a plan. By then, I'd started referring to the next morning as D-Day. Normally, D-Day meant things like product launches, impossible deadlines, or the moment payroll finally hit my account. This one involved sprinting into the woods and hoping for the best. The day before I was supposed to run, I finally lost my patience. It had come back that evening and settled into its usual spot across the den. Nothing unusual, nothing different. By that point, though, I'd been trapped there for more than a week, and I was tired, hungry, filthy, and running out of reasons to stay quiet. So I spoke. At first, I just asked questions. Why was I there? What did it want from me? Was it going to let me leave? Then I got angry. I started raising my voice, demanding answers, telling it to let me go. None of it made any sense. I knew that, even while I was doing it. But after 8 days, I didn't care. The reaction was immediate. It straightened up and made a sharp sound I'd never heard before. Not loud, but forceful enough to cut me off in the middle of a sentence. Then it turned its head toward the entrance and stayed completely still. Then it looked back at me. I don't know how to explain why, but the message felt obvious. For me to shut up. I didn't say another word that night. By day 8, the conversation nobody wanted to have was starting to happen around the edges of the search camp. 8 days had passed, and the forest had given them nothing. Every lead had gone cold. Every search area had come up empty. My friends pushed back hard. They kept repeating the same things they'd been saying from the beginning. The phone call, the screaming, the tracks they had found. They argued that whatever had happened to me wasn't a normal missing person case, and that normal search methods weren't going to find me. The problem was that nobody knew what to do with that. There wasn't a protocol for the story they were telling. My family refused to give up. They asked for one more full push into the forest, the largest search effort yet, reaching farther than any of the previous teams had gone. The request was approved. The next morning, they were going back into the woods. The same morning I was planning to get out. The day had finally come. The window opened earlier than usual. It was gone before there was much light coming through the entrance. Earlier than any morning I'd tracked, I started counting as soon as the sound of it moving through the trees faded away. 500, 600, 700, nothing. I stood up and put my pack on, tightened the straps, took out the whistle, and kept it in my hand. The bear spray was clipped where I could reach it quickly, and the lighter was tucked into my jacket pocket. Then I moved to the entrance and waited. For a full minute, I just listened. The forest was starting to wake up. Birds, wind moving through the trees, early morning light filtering through the canopy. Nothing that sounded like it was coming back. Then I stepped outside. The cold air hit me immediately. After more than a week inside that den, the open space almost felt unreal. I gave myself a few seconds. Then I picked a direction downhill and started moving. I ran as fast as I could. I never looked back. The ground was uneven and covered in roots, and I went down hard more than once, but I got up and kept moving. My body was in rough shape by then. I'd spent more than a week barely eating and barely moving, and my legs felt it. But fear can carry you farther than you think. At some point, I pulled out the whistle and started using it. 3 short blasts every few minutes while I moved, hoping somebody out there might hear it. Then I heard something moving in the same direction I was. I didn't turn around. I blew the whistle again and kept going. A few minutes later, I heard a voice, a man calling back somewhere ahead. I changed direction immediately and started pushing toward it, crashing through brush and branches without caring how much noise I was making. At that point, all I cared about was getting to another human being. The man turned out to be a local hunter who had joined the search, older, wearing a heavy jacket with a rifle slung over his shoulder. When I stumbled out of the trees and into view, he took one look at me and started moving my way. By then, my legs were barely holding me up. He caught me before I hit the ground. I told him we needed to keep moving and that something was behind me. He didn't ask questions. He just got me moving and led me through the woods. I don't know how long we walked after that. It felt like a long time. Eventually, we reached a fire road. The moment I stepped onto it, whatever had been keeping me moving finally ran out. Everything after that happened fast. People arrived, checked me over, handed me water, and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I remember looking back toward the tree line and having a hard time believing I was actually out. The search camp wasn't far away. As soon as word got back, my family headed straight for the road. I've been home for a little over a week now. I still sleep with the light on. Sometimes I wake up suddenly and for a moment think I'm still in that den. I'm getting used to being home again, but some things still feel strange. Crowded places tire me out faster than they used to, and I catch myself paying attention to sounds I never would have noticed before. People keep asking what took me. They want an answer that makes sense. This is the only answer I have. I was taken on May 24th, 2026. I was gone for 10 days, and I was abducted by Bigfoot.